The Trump administration unveiled a $4.1 trillion budget proposal today. It increases spending on defense, Veterans Affairs, but there are cuts in funding for Medicaid and food stamps. Here's how the president's budget director explained it.
We look at spending differently. We're no longer going to measure compassion by the number of programs or the number of people on those programs, but by the number of people we help get off of those programs. That is how you can help people take charge of their own lives again.
Watch this, the Democrats reacting.
The Trump budget is comic book villain bad.
The budget will be dead on arrival, but it also reflects, I think, the priorities of this administration, which is very problematic.
This is a killer for the American people, literally a killer.
Gregory?
Yes.
The most interesting aspect of this is Mick Mulvaney, the budget director, says taxpayers first budget. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of great stuff in here, and I'm not sure if it's cuts or the rate of growth is being reduced, which means it still goes up. But they're talking about let me the positives here: job training, apprenticeships, reforms that encourage work. If you're getting any handouts, encouraging work, you're breaking the grip of dependency. There are reforms to the food stamp program. What this is doing is it's actually raising the question about the war on poverty programs and the effects that they've had. Since the war on poverty, you've seen racial gaps in income levels, test scores, unemployment, illegitimacy rates. What if these war on poverty programs actually didn't exist? Billions of people might be independent, successful individuals instead of dependent.
You know, Dana, it's an interesting point. We just don't have time for me to go back and forth with you. But, Dana, the math is interesting here because they're predicting 3 to 4% growth. Nobody else is. Is it realistic?
I think, if they said 3% growth, not 4%, which I actually think is much more realistic, and that there are a lot of assumptions in here, but I think they also have to be prepared. Have facts about how these programs are not working and be ready, because the Democrats will be able to roll out all sorts of anecdotes and you have to be ready to fight. Also, most people on Capitol Hill blew this off because this is not actually going to become law. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth. So Republicans have to decide, is this the hill you want to die on? Probably not.
Well, no. In fact, John Cornyn, number 2 in the Senate, says this is a non-starter.
It's dead on arrival, but it is a beautiful blueprint. And I think Mulvaney is a total star. He totally flipped the switch on the Democrats. He's saying we want to make sure people get off welfare, not on welfare. We want to respect the taxpayers, not the tax recipients. And then he had a great line when they asked him, why are you slashing the budget at the EPA? He goes, the EPA had a climate change musical. What kind of thing is that to spend taxpayer money on, Juan? Even you can agree that's ridiculous.
Well, it depends how good
he likes musicals.
For example, Kimberly could have been in the musical, and I would have paid to see that.
Maybe
right.
You're such a sucker for flattery.
I'm just thinking what tune I can
Kimberly,
say.
I want to put it to you.
Yes.
Trump said no cuts, Social Security, but guess what? Social Security disability cuts.
Okay, well, yes, and Mnuchin also said on Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo that they weren't going to touch, the entitlements, etc. But the big proposal and focus of this is going to be tax reform. But nevertheless, tax reform should be the banner here. That should be the headline. That's what the voters want in terms of the mandate that President Trump was elected on. So I don't think we're going to see any of these cuts really materialize. I think that he's got to focus on this, and if he doesn't get tax reform done, they're in big trouble for 2018.
So it's all about tax reform. I think that's right. One more thing.
It's time now for one more thing. Greg.
Just go to this. Greg's Fitness Tips. Look, the key to a strong back is strong abs, even for a dog. Check out this workout where the dog is actually doing a really good set of leg lifts. Either that or he's got a painful rectal itch. You don't know. But he's scratching away, everybody.
You're so gross.
Oh, come on. We're all humans.
Oh, that's pretty cute. Jesse.
Not like you
think.
think.
Tough act to follow there. On another note, Roger Moore, who played James Bond in 7 Bond films, passed away, age 89. One of the greatest actors in that series, my favorite Bond, actually. And so I think everybody should raise a glass, maybe a martini, shaken, not stirred.
I'm not surprised he's your favorite.
Why is that?
Because he was the meanest.
What are you saying?
Okay, Kimberly.
Thank you, and a wonderful medical development. This is a touching story for you. Take a look at this adorable toddler, 1-year-old Annabelle Lawless. She was born deaf last year, but now she's hearing clearly for the first time thanks to brand new cochlear implant device activated by doctors yesterday in Boise, Idaho. Take a look at her and how adorable she is. So she can finally hear sounds clearly thanks to this amazing medical miracle. So excited she
Look how
is.
smile.
So cute.
That's terrific.
They say it will allow her to someday talk just like any other child. Isn't that incredible?
All right.
So God bless them.
All right, today is International Day to End Obstetric Fistula. I posted a video on Facebook. You can check that out. You can raise awareness about the condition. Here's some quick stats. Estimated 2.3 million people, women and girls with the condition worldwide. About 100,000 cases develop annually, and the condition is entirely preventable. So you can go to freedomfromfistula.org, find out a lot more, and see how you can help. All right, Juan.
Marty O'Connor and his mom, Judy, received degrees at Chapman University this weekend. Marty is a quadriplegic. His mom moved from Florida to California so she could take every class, take notes for him.
Wow.
The school thought, you know, she deserves a degree too, so they gave her a degree. She said she loves school. Congratulations to you both. What a wonderful story of love unbounded by a mother for her child.
I love that story. And look, we have extra time.
How did that
Yeah,
happen?
I don't
because
know.
I
Never
ran
miss an
through it.
episode
I
of The
ran
Five. DVR us, listen to our podcast, all sorts of things, stretching here. Hannity's up next.
And thanks to our friends on the 5, great show. This is a Fox News alert. Welcome to Hannity. Breaking news tonight in the aftermath of the brutal terror attack in Manchester, England, that has killed over 20 people, including children, and injuring dozens more. The UK has now raised its terror threat level to critical. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Monica Crowley, Jay Sekulow, Sarah Carter, John Solomon, Michelle Malkin, all join us tonight with reaction. Also, in a minute, I have a very important message for you, my audience. But first, President Trump is finally confronting evil in our time head-on with moral clarity in the fight to defeat radical Islamic terrorism. American leadership is now needed more than ever, and that is tonight's very important opening monologue. So what we saw take place last night in Manchester, England, is the definition of pure evil in our time. ISIS is now claiming responsibility after a suicide bomber targeted an Ariana Grande concert full of children and teenagers. An 8-year-old girl is among the victims lost in this evil, barbaric terrorist attack. And witnesses are saying that the explosion sprayed bolts and other metal pieces, likely intended to cause the maximum amount of destruction and death. Now tonight, America and the world, you face a choice. We can either roll over, appease, capitulate to this radical and evil ideology that even targets innocent people, including women and young children, like we saw in Manchester, or we can draw a line in the sand and fight back against this evil in our time and defeat this cancer, radical Islamic terrorism, once and for all. Now, President Trump, he's made his choice. He is no longer willing to stand by in face of terror. Instead, he is calling on the world of good people to come together and fight back. And earlier today, the president addressed this act of terrorism from Manchester. Watch this.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name. I will call them from now on losers because that's what they are. They're losers. And we'll have more of them. But they're losers. Just remember that.
And over the weekend in Saudi Arabia, President Trump gave a historic speech. No apologies, no political correctness, none of the weakness displayed by President Obama over the past 8 years. President Trump leading from the front, identifying what is really at stake, that this is a battle between good and evil. Watch these powerful words.
It's a choice between two futures, and it is a choice America cannot make for you. A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth. Muslim nations must be willing to take on the burden if we are going to defeat terrorism and send its wicked ideology into oblivion. The first task in this joint effort is for your nations to deny all territory to the foot soldiers of evil. Every country in the region has an absolute duty to ensure that terrorists find no sanctuary on their soil.
Remember, President Trump said that in Saudi Arabia before what happened in Manchester. The president is now using principled realism, rooted in partnership, not perfection, as he said. The president wasn't lecturing, wasn't talking down to these nations. By the way, they're not easily going to change the way they do things. Instead, in front of 50 Arab leaders, 50 countries, he's calling on them to eradicate the foot soldiers of evil. And he's asking the Arab world to now step up and to do its part and to come together and unite around a common goal: to defeat ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism, evil in our time. That is now needed, now more than ever. Also tonight, the unsolved murder of former DNC staffer Seth Rich continues to get a huge amount of attention. Now, I want to say something. I totally, completely understand how upset, how hard this is on this family, especially over the recent coverage of Seth's death. Now, I have been communicating with them. I got a very heartfelt note. I also sent them a heartfelt note back. I reached out personally today to Seth's brother, Aaron. I expressed my condolences out over how hard, how difficult this has been for him and his family. And as I told Aaron, my heart, my soul, my prayers, everything goes out to them in this very difficult time. I'm a father. I know, I don't think I'd ever recover from losing a child or a brother. I honestly don't think I would. I cannot imagine the pain that they are in. And as a father, when I saw the video of the parents online saying they want answers, and I know the brother Aaron started a GoFundMe page, it truly pained me. However, out of respect for the family's wishes for now, I am not discussing this matter at this time. Now let me explain this. There are so many issues here, not the least of which is the Democratic push of their Russia narrative, collusion, Trump, Russia narrative, Trump, Russia narrative. There's something clearly happening here. The Destroy Trump media, the Democrats, they have been pushing that Russian tin-foil hat conspiracy theory with zero evidence. For example, earlier today on Capitol Hill, former CIA Director John Brennan was asked about Russia collusion. Take a look.
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals, and it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals. I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed. I don't know. But I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
And you remember back in March, during an interview on Meet the Press, the former Obama Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, he also said no evidence of Russia collusion. Watch this.
We did not include any evidence in our report, and I say our, that's NSA, FBI, and CIA with my office, the Director of National Intelligence, that had anything, that had any reflection of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that included in our report.
I understand that, but does it exist?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, predictably, Clapper has been changing his tune about what he said in March, but he's not the only person who has come forward and admitted that there is zero evidence of collusion. But yet they keep pushing this narrative in the Destroy Trump media. For example, listen to top Democratic lawmakers. They're saying there's no evidence. Watch this.
Have you seen anything that suggests any collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign?
Well, there's an awful lot of smoke there, let's put it that way. People that might have said they were involved, to what extent they were involved, to what extent the president might have known about these people or whatever. There's nothing there from that standpoint that we have seen directly linking our president to any of that.
The last time we spoke, Senator, I asked you if you had actually seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and you said to me, and I'm quoting you now, you said, not at this time. Has anything changed since we spoke last?
Well, no, it hasn't.
I know we need to go soon, but just to be clear, there has been no actual evidence yet.
No, it has not been.
Okay. I just want
No, it has not.
Now, in addition to Democrats admitting that they've seen no evidence whatsoever, back in January, while testifying under oath, James Clapper also said no evidence that Russia affected the actual vote tallies. His words, not mine.
First, we cannot say they did not change any vote tallies or anything of that sort.
Yeah, I'm just talking
we had no way of gauging the impact that certainly the intelligence community can't gauge the impact it had on choices the electorate made.
So there's no evidence of collusion. Nothing to suggest that actual votes were changed. Now, of course, these facts have not stopped the Destroy Trump media night after night after night. They have been pushing this tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. It is beyond shameful. It's not rooted in fact. No evidence, no votes impacted. I'm not the one saying it. You just heard it for yourself. Take a look.
Wouldn't it be nice if it was just completely, totally, absolutely impossible to suspect that Vladimir Putin orchestrated what happened in Syria this week so that his friend in the White House could have a big night with missiles and all of the praise he's picked up over the last 24 hours? Wouldn't it be so nice if you couldn't even in your wildest dreams imagine a scenario like that?
I'll say it again. This Russian connection just keeps building, and every time it builds and expands, you have to wonder if Trump himself isn't worried about what's swirling around under the covers.
CNN has learned new details of the FBI investigation into potential links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government.
Specifically, Willie, I think what it means is that a federal judge found that people in Trump's organization were colluding with the Russians.
So we've shown you no evidence of Russia collusion, no votes changed. The media, Destroy Trump media, has completely misrepresented the facts. Now, I want to say this to you, my loyal audience, which is very important. Please do not interpret what I'm saying tonight to mean anything. Don't read into this. I promise you I am not going to stop doing my job. To the extent of my ability, I am not going to stop trying to find the truth. That's what we do here every single day. That effort is not stopping in any way, shape, matter, or form. I am continuing the work that I promised to do every day for you, and at the proper time, we shall continue and talk a lot more. As for my job here at the Fox News Channel, there is an effort now abound to silence me. Media Matters is attacking my advertising base. That is what we have called on this program liberal fascism, attack, boycott, all in an effort to silence conservatives. I serve at the pleasure of the Fox News Channel, and I am here to do my job every night. I'm under contract, as long as they seem to want me. Coming up, Deputy Assistant to the President, Sebastian Gorka. He'll weigh in on the terror attack targeting children in Manchester. And Monica Crowley and Jay Sekulow, they weigh in. And later, an explosive investigation report by Circa News' Sarah Carter, John Solomon, about how the Obama administration violated your privacy rights for years and only revealed what was happening just days before President Trump was elected. Sarah and John break that news in a disturbing new report.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term.
All right, that was President Trump earlier today talking about the terror attack on innocent civilians, young people, last night at a concert in Manchester, England. Now, the president still is on his overseas trip and is continuing his push to eradicate ISIS and violent Islamic extremists across the world. Joining us now with reaction, Deputy Assistant to the President, and that is Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, good to see you. First, your reaction to that, and then I want to talk about a speech from Saudi Arabia on Saturday.
Well, good evening, Sean. First things first, the language the president used is incredibly important. He called them evil losers. Why? Number one, because this is a war with evil. It's not people who are unemployed or who are suffering political disenfranchisement. This is evil walking the earth that must be obliterated. Secondly, he said, we're not going to call them monsters. Why? Because monsters are frightening. Monsters are powerful. These people are cowards, nothing less. Evil cowards. And as the president said, they will be obliterated.
Let me go to what I played in the last block, Dr. Gorka, because I think that by far the single defining speech by an American president addressing evil in our time. Now, we lost in the last century 100 million human souls. The gulags, Stalin, Russia, Nazism, fascism, Imperial Japan, the killing fields, Cambodia, 100 million souls. And let me just play some of Donald Trump from his speech.
A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out.
Some of the most powerful language identifying evil in our time. That drive them out, extraordinarily powerful. I know the Trump, Russia, conspiracy, media, destroy Trump media, that's all they've been focused on. But they've missed one of the biggest moments with an American president and 50 leaders in the Arab world that has ever occurred in history. Your reaction?
The president made history. Not only is the first president to go to the Wailing Wall with his Jewish son-in-law, with his Jewish daughter. This is a man who rekindled, who channeled Ronald Reagan's evil empire speech. Sean, remember that the 20th century was the story of evil ideologies threatening the whole of Western civilization, and it took America to defeat them. We defeated, with our friends, with our allies, the Nazis. We defeated, thanks to Ronald Reagan, thanks to Margaret Thatcher, thanks to St. John Paul II, the Soviet Union. But what was the key moment? The key moment was in 1987 when the president stood up and said, tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev, when he called the Soviet Union an evil empire. The president today went into the heart of this region, went to the land of Mecca and Medina and said, look, we have a problem. You have to help us. You have to get the terrorists out of your places of worship, out of your communities. He showed leadership. We're not going to solve your problems for you, but we face an evil threat, a threat that kills 8-year-old girls at pop concerts. Leadership is back, and we are going to defeat this threat just as we defeated the Nazis, just as we defeated the Soviet Union.
You know, I love when he said, terrorists do not worship God. They worship death. What was so evil about Manchester, and by the way, when I interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu the time before the last time I was just in Israel, he said to me, he talked about the great Satan, America, the little Satan, Israel, and I talked about what they have experienced and the terror that they face every day. And he warned that this is a preview of coming attractions. We see it in Chattanooga, San Bernardino, Fort Hood, the Pulse nightclub, the Sarnav brothers, the Boston bombing. If we don't get a hold of this, we're talking about the potential of so many more people dying. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, I shudder to think of the human catastrophe that could take place. I don't think the left in this country understands, as they fight the president on vetting of people that come from cultures that clash with ours, clash of civilization, grow up under Sharia that persecutes women, gays, lesbians, Christians, and Jews. They don't get it. Why do they not get it?
Sean, I can't apologize for people who just ignore reality. The Jewish community, the people of Israel, they are literally the canaries in the coal mine. Because remember, it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. Just as in the death camps during the Nazi horrors of World War II. The fact is, what Israel has been suffering for decades is only now being appreciated by people around the world who are not Jewish. So why the left doesn't understand? Because they see us as the problem. Why was there an apology tour? Why was the Muslim Brotherhood in the front row of President Obama's speech at the Al-Azhar? Because they denied reality. They said it's about jobs for jihadis and economics and lack of education. No, it's about totalitarianism. That's the threat to America.
Dr. Gorka, we have an opportunity to create an alliance that is unprecedented. The Saudis, the Israelis, the Egyptians, Jordanians, the Emirates, and others. But they have now got to step up. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. When we come back, more reaction to the horrific terror attack in Manchester. Monica Crowley, Jay Sekulow are here. Also, Sarah Carter, John Solomon, Circa News, with an explosive new report about how the Obama administration has violated your privacy rights for years and only revealed what was happening just days before President Trump was elected. They'll be here with breaking details, and also tonight.
I repeat again that we must drive out the terrorists and the extremists from our midst. Obliterate this evil ideology.
In the wake of yesterday's deadly terror attack in Manchester, President Trump continues his push to defeat terrorism. Michelle Malkin is here to weigh in tonight.
Good evening and live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. President Trump's 9-day overseas trip taking him to Rome today. In just a few hours, he will participate in an expanded audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican. Earlier, Mideast peace talks was on the agenda as he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. President Trump voicing optimism after the talks. Listen.
I am committed to trying to achieve a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and I intend to do everything I can to help them achieve that goal. President Abbas assures me he is ready to work toward that goal in good faith, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised the same.
And we here at Fox News will take you live to the Vatican when the president visits early tomorrow morning, just a couple of hours. I'm Jackie Ibanez, now back to Hannity.
Welcome back to Hannity. And last night, as we began getting initial information on the tragic terror attack in Manchester, the alt-left media, well, they seem reluctant to admit that it could be terror-related. Instead, they warn their audiences about racing to conclusions. Over there on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow was telling her viewers that in a similar case, well, initial reports were conflicting or did not bear out over time. Then you had over at CNN, Anderson Cooper, quote, there is probably more that we don't know. And by the way, we should all be reasonable. Joining us with reaction from the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, by the way, who's done legal work for me in the past, and conservative commentator Monica Crowley. Yeah, I think we should be cautious, but I'd say the overwhelming vast majority of times, Jay, it turns out to be terror, doesn't it? Radical Islamic terror.
It does, and this president's changed the paradigm. President Obama operated under the assumption that it wasn't terrorism and then proved that it is. Where I think right now you've got is when you have a situation that fits a particular fact pattern, which unfortunately last night did, you start with the proposition, which the UK authorities did, by the way, that it's a terrorist incident. They suspect it's a terrorist incident, and then if it's not, well, prove that it's not okay. But it's horrible regardless. But in this particular case, it had all the hallmarks of an ISIS attack, is what they've been calling for, seeking out the targets. That's what they've been calling it, soft targets. And, of course, the difference here was the nature of the explosion. If this was, as it seems to be, if it was one explosion, in other words, one device, it was a device that created a tremendous amount of carnage, and that shows a level of sophistication. That means that we're bomb makers. And again, my thoughts and prayers and condolences to the families and the victims that are suffering even today.
Yeah, and you can't say it enough. I mean, it's so painful.
Yeah.
I have a daughter.
Yeah.
You know, and her friends, they like girls like Ariana Grande, and for a period she loved Taylor Swift and loves her, you know, and they want to go to concerts. Do we now have to think, oh, there's going to be an extremist with shrapnel bombs that, if God forbid, that actually got inside the stadium? I shudder to think of the misery and evil.
Well, this is the reality in which we live. We've been living with this reality now in the United States, particularly in the West, since 9/11. But even before that, Osama bin Laden declared war on the United States in the 1990s, and here we are. This is our reality. Fortunately, now we have a president, we have leadership that understands the true nature of the threat, is willing to define it publicly, and is willing to fight it. This president has liberated the U.S. military so that they don't have to go through all of these bureaucratic nightmare channels in order to get the okay to bomb ISIS sites, for example, sites in Afghanistan, the enemy sites across the Middle East and across the world, where we know the enemy is launching attacks and staging recruiting and training camps, etc. We finally have an American commander-in-chief who is committed to the fight, understands the true nature of the enemy, and is willing to tell the truth about it.
Jay, I got to keep going back to these words. I mean, drive them out. Drive them out. This is a battle between good and evil. You know, for all the time, Bibi Netanyahu has been the lone adult with moral clarity on the world stage. Thankfully, now he has a partner. I was also very impressed with the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, and her handling of this and her statement. I actually see an emerging potential for a coalition that nobody ever dreamed of before. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, you know, in England, of course, this evening, they've had to raise the threat level to imminent, which means they're expecting, based on their intelligence, something imminent. I mean, that's the highest of highest levels. But there's another aspect of what the president said here that I think is so critical. Not only did he say drive them out, he gave specific places where you have to drive them out. Drive them out of your houses of worship. That means inside the mosque. When you see this, you have to drive it out. Drive it out from your communities. When you're in your communities and someone is doing things that are inappropriate, building a bomb, having discussions that you think show radicalization, you've got to call them out. Build them, get them out of your towns, get them out of your cities, get them off the earth. This is the approach you have to take, but it starts with the community itself. Policing. I mean, the policing has to start within the community.
And
this
you
is
wrote
that
one
serious.
of the first books, Jay, on ISIS, so I really take what you're saying here to heart, and Sebastian Gorka and others. You want to say, Monica?
Yeah, look, this is the global jihad. This is not
Caliphate.
Yes, this
Convert
is
or
not
die.
a big mystery. So the clips you were talking about last night from some on the left in the media, and they want to take the time. I understand being cautious when you're covering breaking news, but the idea that somehow this is a mystery, and for everybody to come out and say, I am shocked, I'm surprised. Of course this is a horrific tragedy, but this is where we are. We are in an existential war for Western civilization. The jihadis make no qualms about telling us exactly who they are, what they believe, and what they intend to do. We choose in the West not to listen, not to believe them, and yet they keep attacking us and they keep telling us the truth.
Some don't believe it.
A lot of people in the West want to tune
Nigel
it down.
Farage told me today, I've been trying to tell you what has happened
I
here.
tried to tell you. That is exactly
and it's
right.
coming. He goes, please listen.
Well,
he
it's
loves
here.
this. He loves America
It's
as
here.
a Brit.
It's across Western Europe. It is here in the United States. We've experienced a number of very tragic mass casualty attacks. It is here, and that's why, thank God, we finally have leadership that's willing to take the fight exactly to the enemy and call it what it is.
Well said, both of you. When we come back, an investigative report. Sarah Carter, John Solomon, CircaNews.com. A major breaking story tonight about how the Obama administration has violated your privacy rights for years. They'll explain, and also tonight.
I repeat again that we must drive out the terrorists and the extremists from our midst. Obliterate this evil ideology.
The president stays strong today in Jerusalem, renewing his push to eradicate ISIS and violent Islamic extremism, especially in the wake of yesterday's deadly terror attack in Manchester. Michelle Malkin is here to weigh in tonight. Welcome back. back to Hannity now. Former CIA director under President Obama, John Brennan. He testified on Capitol Hill earlier today as part of the investigation into whether Russia interfered in our 2016 presidential election. Now, this comes as a new explosive report by Circa News. John Solomon and Sarah Carter details how an Obama intelligence agency violated Americans' privacy for years and then secretly disclosed this at a closed-door hearing just days before President Donald Trump was elected. And today, during his congressional testimony, well, Brennan had this to say about whether or not he personally requested to have Americans' names unmasked. Watch this.
We're talking about prohibitions that you place on yourself with respect to identifying U.S. persons as part of our surveillance programs, right?
That's correct.
All right.
Yes.
And you just cited some of the very important reasons that we do that, and I would assume that there is a process, a protocol under which the intelligence community goes through if they seek to unmask a U.S. person's name.
That's correct.
Have you ever requested that a U.S. person's name be unmasked?
Yes, I have.
Joining us now with the breaking report from Circa News, Sarah Carter and John Solomon. Sarah, let's start with you. Tell us about this breaking news report, and a lot more to come tomorrow, as I understand it.
Yes, Sean. What we know is this. We just broke this story yesterday, was that the CIA is the largest consumer of unmasking Americans of any agency that we know right now. We can't give you exact numbers because those are classified, but we know that the majority of unmasking of Americans occurred with the CIA. What's even more interesting about that is that, you know, under the CIA's own purview, I mean, since 1947, their charter is not to spy on Americans. So the question is, why are they doing this? What are they looking at? And for what purposes? What John and I are also breaking is the fact that we know that the NSA under Obama violated the privacy protections when they were searching, actually, the databases at the NSA. So nobody knew this until we were able to get our hands on these documents, John and I, and these are from the FISA courts. And what happened was Obama last fall, his administration actually admitted to the courts that they had been in violation of these rules, and they were actually chastised by the courts. I mean, severely chastised, saying that they were, you know, violating the Fourth Amendment rights of Americans. And I think these are two very serious issues.
All right. I want you to juxtapose this, John, if you may, if you can, for our audience. The increase in surveillance that you saw in this election cycle. Remember, I first interviewed at CPAC. This was March of 2015, this presidential election cycle, recent one started. And what you saw in terms of surveillance, unmasking, the percentage of increase, I think I got it wrong in a recent report. I thought I was quoting you at 600, but over 350%.
Right.
And connected to what Sarah just explained to our audience.
Yeah, you know, you said a couple weeks ago, Sean, that it felt like we were peeling back an onion, and that's exactly what we've done. So we started by saying Obama loosened the rules to allow the espionage community to look more at Americans' data. Then we reported that they look at Donald Trump's associates and unmasked them in intelligence report. Then we reported that they unmasked members of Congress. Then we reported that the number of unmaskings tripled, 300% increase under Barack Obama after he changed the rules. And tonight, for the first time, we can say confidently that there's been a finding that some of that espionage, that spying on Americans, actually violated the law. The court actually concluded that it violated the Fourth Amendment protection against illegal search and seizure. So we've gone from something that at the beginning, when Susan Rice first defended herself, that all this is illegal and governed by very tight rules, to now, yes, we violated those rules, and they disclosed that just days before Trump was elected president. There's a reason to go to the court that late in election season. We'll have to find out why they did it then.
I want to ask you both this because this is so important. So you see a dramatic increase in surveillance, unmasking. We know that intelligence leaking has occurred. And we have John Brennan today admitting that unmasking occurred.
Yeah.
So I guess what the American people really need to know, and Sarah, I'll throw this to you, we really need to know if this government, under the guise of using national security, used the weaponry of our intelligence agencies to spy, unmask political opponents in an election cycle, political opposition in an election cycle. And how deep does it go? And in other words, and how high up does it go? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, Sean. And I think there's enough evidence that we've been able to present through our numerous stories and our investigation to suggest that somebody needs to look into this. Now, remember, all of these documents are highly classified. So if anybody was to leak to us, let's say, a report that was collected, like a tech cut or a FISA report that they had access to, that they actually saw, we don't know what they were looking at. We don't know exactly what we have our suspicions. And based on what people have said, that these reports basically had nothing to do with Russia or Russian collusion, but appeared to be very strange on their face. Reports, we know that some of them were regarding the president and other people in his campaign. And so if you're looking at that on its face, there's enough suspicion to believe that there is a possibility that this could have been used as political espionage, weaponization of intelligence. This is what the intelligence community...
Can you give me a little, I know this is hard, a little glimpse into what you're going to bring to our audience on this program tomorrow night?
I think what we're... Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John. Interrupt Sarah, your partner. That's all right.
I know. I was very rude, wasn't that? One out of every 20 times that the NSA conducted a search on Americans' upstream data, stuff they got from the internet, people that they weren't targeting, but they incidentally collected, 1 out of every 20 times it violated their own rules, the very rules that were set in place to, 1, protect privacy, and 2, to guard against political espionage.
And up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
I repeat again that we must drive out the terrorists and the extremists from our midst. Obliterate this evil ideology.
In the wake of yesterday's deadly terror attack in Manchester, the president once again says terrorism must be eradicated. Up next, we get reaction. Michelle Malkin is straight ahead.
Corey Lewandowski and what it could mean for the administration. The former campaign manager speaks out.
Dozens of innocent people, beautiful young children, savagely murdered in this heinous attack upon humanity. I repeat again that we must drive out the terrorists and the extremists from our midst. Obliterate this evil ideology and protect and defend our citizens and people of the world.
That was the president earlier today in Israel talking about the need to combat terrorism, extremism. Now, in light of yesterday's deadly terror attack in Manchester, England, there has now been renewed support for President Trump's travel ban right here at home. According to a BBC News report, quote, approximately 850 people from the UK have traveled to support or fight for jihadist organizations in Syria and Iraq. And as of February, about half have returned to the UK. Now, earlier today, British newspaper The Express ran a headline that reads, quote, 3,500 potential terrorists and 400 ISIS fighters back from Syria in the UK. Joining us now, the host of Michelle Malkin Investigates, CRTV.com, Michelle Malkin. That is inconceivable to me. Just like those that are unwilling to vet people that grow up in a culture that contradicts our constitutional republic here, where men think they have the right to tell women how to dress and they can't drive, and they can't leave the country without a man's approval, or they kill gays and lesbians and they persecute Christians and Jews, and you can't build temples or places of worship. My question to you is, look at England, look at how we're acting, and the left is reacting here to just vetting people. And what is your reaction if we want to keep the American people safe?
Well, the lesson that we should have learned on September 11th, 2001, Sean, is that unfettered worship, even fetishization of open borders and diversity and political correctness at all costs human lives. I've said many times over the years, Sean, based on all of my reporting on the spread of jihad in America and across the world, that political correctness is the handmaiden of Islamic terror. And you see in the wake of the Manchester attack, the blind, deaf, and dumb virtue signalers of the left. So many of them, of course, Trump bashers in America, but around the world, whose immediate reaction is not to condemn the monsters who were responsible for Manchester and San Bernardino and Fort Hood and the World Trade Center bombings in 1993 and then the attacks in 2001 and on and on and on. No, they think that the existential threat to this world are the people who are calling out the Islamic terrorists and who actually want to take the adult preventive measures needed to stop these things rather than have these virtue signalers whose only solution, of course, is to respond at the back end. You know, we have first responders, but these people are last responders. The only solution they have to Islamic terror is lighting candles and switching their Twitter avatars.
Listen, this is evil beyond measure. And we go through all of these cases. You know, I got a story out here today. Mayor de Blasio's decision to honor a terrorist bomber, and you have these extremists, anti-Semites that speak at these colleges in commencement. There seems to be a missing chip, that people are incapable, and I wrote a book, Deliver Us from Evil. They're incapable of understanding the magnitude of evil and 100 million human souls being destroyed in the last century, and the threat that mankind faces today. They targeted kids below teenage years yesterday. They targeted teenage girls yesterday. They did it with the maximum amount of damage possible as they put all these nails and all these things for maximum carnage. I don't understand for the life of me how we get called racist because we want to keep people safe, and we're just asking that you show that you want to be on our side before we let you in and give you the honor to be in.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing I think that aggravated me the most about the response yesterday after the Manchester attack was this cluelessness about the barbarity of Islamic murderers. And somehow that yesterday was a new kind of low because women and children were targeted, as if we haven't seen that for the last 20 years. This is the way that Islamic killers have operated for millennia, and people need to open their eyes and get woke.
All right, Michelle Malkin, very powerful as always. Thank you for being with us. When we come back, a very important question of the day. Hope you'll join us straight ahead. All right, time for our question of the day. So, do you agree with President Trump? We need to drive
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Last night, at least 22 innocent people were murdered by a suicide bomber in Manchester, England. Today, President Trump commented on the attack during a joint press conference with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers.
Well, you've seen this before and you know what's going to happen next. Unfortunately, our leaders are going to tell us that acts of terror are just something that happens, like the weather. Just accept it and move on. There is nothing you can do, or better yet, just pretend it's not happening all around you. As Katie Kay at BBC put it this morning, Europe is, quote, getting used to attacks like this because they have to, because they're never going to be able to totally wipe this out. You hear that a lot, but consider it for a minute. Why is violent terrorism an inevitability in Europe now? Unless you grew up in Northern Ireland or Italy or the Basque Country, terrorism was not a significant hazard a generation or two ago. Ask someone who was alive then. This is new. Something has changed. What is it? Well, the answer, as most people understand, but relatively few admit, is that demographics change. There are a lot of Muslims living in Europe now. Most of them are indeed decent people, as we're often assured, but a surprisingly large number of them aren't. Check the numbers. In 2006, after just a year after terrorists murdered more than 50 people in London on the subway bombings, A full 20% of British Muslims said they sympathized with the motives of the bombers. Younger Muslims were even more enthusiastic about what had happened, about the killings. In 2007, Pew found that at least 20% of young Muslims here in America, in France, Germany, and Britain and Spain, believe that suicide bombings could be justified. In France, that number was above 40%. Last year, 29% of French Muslims said they viewed Sharia as a higher law than the civil laws of France. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised that radical views are common among Western Muslims because they're even more common in their home nations. In 2014, 47% of Bangladeshi Muslims said suicide bombings to defend Islam were acceptable, almost half. A quarter of Egyptians said the same thing. A fifth of Turks and Malaysians agreed. In 2009, 78% of Pakistani Muslims told Pew that people who leave Islam should be killed, murder for apostasy. In Egypt, support for that was 86%, Afghanistan 79%, Bangladesh 44%, Iraq 42%. Well, these are not little places, obscure theocracies in remote regions. They're some of the biggest countries in the Muslim world, and more to the point, they've sent millions of immigrants to the West. We could go on like this for the whole show. There's an awful lot of research on the subject, and all the numbers tell the same story. Why are they being ignored? Now, our leaders like to boast they believe in science, that they let data and hard evidence drive their policies. They are lying, and never more obviously than in this case. They don't want to see the numbers. They actively suppress them. If you really cared about America, you wouldn't want it to become Europe, dangerous, divided, unstable. You wouldn't import a massive Muslim minority into your country simply because it made you feel open-minded and virtuous, and then hope for the best. That's a faith-based approach, and it's nuts. We know exactly what will happen if we do that because we're watching it live on television from Manchester right now. If you really cared about the country you led, you'd figure out how to make sure that every person you imported, of any religion, enthusiastically shared your most cherished values: tolerance, pluralism, free speech, equality under the law, just for starters. You tell them not to litter, by the way, when they're here too. We do the opposite. Our leaders worship multiculturalism, so we encourage immigrants to reject our culture in favor of their own because all cultures are equal, except that they're not all equal, as we were reminded last night with the murder of children in an arena in Manchester. Defend what you believe or you will lose it. That's the message of Manchester, just as it is also the basic lesson of all of history. But what if you don't believe in anything at all? Our leaders don't. Maybe that's why they can't defend us. Maajid Nawaz is a former Islamic extremist. He's thought a lot about this. He's co-founder of the anti-Islamist group Quilliam, and he joins us tonight. Nawaz, thanks a lot for coming on. So,
Pleasure.
What's the response from the West that wants to remain pluralist, certainly doesn't want to ban people based on their religion or their country? Most people don't want to do that, but they also don't want to have unstable, chaotic societies. What do they do?
Well, currently, and you're correct, there's this meme going around that this is the new normal, that we must just come to terms with this and that we must carry on as normal, act calm, behave calm, and stand united. And that's all well and good. Of course, there is a role for solidarity. It's absolutely essential. We show solidarity to the victims and the families of this horrific attack. But, you know, what kind of world is it in which I have to accept that the slaughter of my children, of youth in a concert is normal, and that's just nothing I can do about it? What kind of world do we want to live in where we just accept that as a status quo? In any other world, that would be called apathy and appeasement. In fact, we should never accept that as a normal. And that leads to another meme that's going around, that these are somehow lone wolves, which again speaks to your introduction. These aren't lone wolves. In fact, this is a myth, this idea of lone wolves. Research, back to facts and study, research found that up to 80% of jihadist attacks and the attackers are connected to networks, ideologies, groups, and others who knew of their radicalization. They are almost never alone. But this myth of the fact that they are lone actors serves three purposes mainly. One is it allows security services, when they commit mistakes and oversights, to say there was nothing we could do about it anyway because they were lone actors. We couldn't have stopped them nor predicted them. It allows politicians, number two, to say there's nothing we can do about it and thereby retreat to a politically correct standard. And third, it allows, most importantly, our communities to shirk responsibility, because of course the truth is we're in the midst in Europe of a jihadist insurgency where people who are like me and others and live among us have become radicalized, and it wasn't ISIS that radicalized them. Right. ISIS plucked the low-hanging fruit. They've been radicalized for decades because of this ideology that's been spreading in our communities.
So what do we do about it? What do authorities do about it? I mean, again, how do you maintain a liberal, in the best sense, free society when you're actually living among people who want to kill you? I mean, how do you stop that?
So if we understand it in this way, that there is an ideology that's been recruiting for decades, I say decades, and ISIS simply plucked the low-hanging fruit, then the first thing we need to do is, look, if I was living during the US civil rights crisis, back in the days when segregation was still rife, you would call me an apologist if I didn't get involved to fight segregation, racial segregation. You don't have to be Muslim to challenge this extremism. Muslims and non-Muslims all have to stand together to challenge Islamist theocratic extremism, just as we're responsible to challenge racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism and other ills in society. So this is a full-on civil society campaign to reassert and protect our liberal values against these theocratic values, and that genuinely requires action from government, but more importantly from communities.
People have to stop being embarrassed and stand up for the Enlightenment values that our society is based on. It doesn't seem hard, but it is hard, and you are leading the fight for that, and I appreciate your coming on tonight to talk to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, British police are aggressively investigating the attack that occurred last night in Manchester, but it's not their only priority tonight. They're also keeping an eye out for CrimethInc on the internet. Those are unapproved thoughts that people might express, including those from DailyMail.com columnist Katie Hopkins. She tweeted after the attacks this: Western men, these are your wives, your daughters, your sons. Stand up, rise up, demand action. Do not carry on as normal, cowed. Well, for that, another Twitter user reported her to the police in Great Britain, and the police confirmed they were investigating. She was also reported for a since-deleted tweet, which she said she miswrote, saying that Britain needed a final solution to terrorism, and she reworded that later. Katie Hopkins joins us tonight. So terrorists attack an arena in Manchester and kill children, and you're under investigation. How does that work exactly, Katie?
I really don't know anymore here in the UK. What I can say is there's certain thoughts you're just simply not allowed to have. So for me to say that this is no good anymore, it's not good enough even to say that we can't carry on as normal, I demand action. I want people to use their anger to say, we need to do something to stop this. We need to be deporting these people, deport the people that are hiding them, and get amongst this, because this is our little girl, our 8-year-old little Safi that died, slaughtered. We need to be able to talk like that. We're not allowed to talk like that. Now, clearly, certain things I tweet, I absolutely accept words matter. I use the word final solution in a tweet, and I would not in any way want to use that term and the inference other people lay on that. What I meant was we need a lasting solution, a resolution to this.
You got to figure out how to fix it.
My deep upset. Yeah, it's that, but it's 24 hours now since I woke up to the news of what had gone on, and I just feel what we're missing is that real feeling of emotion connecting with the fact that this is our little girls. These are our children. This could be our children next. We've just had the threat level raised to critical, which is the maximum level. Military are coming into our streets, which of course is a great thing. But what I always wonder, Tucker, is how did we go from saying we are strong, we stand united, we are not cowed, to tanks arriving on our street? We do have a problem. We did have a problem. And now our little girls have been slaughtered in the worst possible way with nails and nuts and bolts in a homemade bomb. My children at breakfast this morning said, you know what, I'd much rather be shot than caught in a bomb that's made of ball bearings. And I just wonder, what conversation are we having here in 21st century Britain when that's what children are growing up with? Children are growing up with terror being normal and a man planting a bomb filled with nuts in bolts when they're out having fun. That's normal in Britain, and we brought that war into our country. We brought that war onto our pavements, onto our streets, and I don't hear anybody still, no politician standing up and saying, I am sorry, we were wrong, we are going to change what we have done.
Of course not.
Islamic extremism cannot go on.
They're investigating you for your tweets in the country that gave the rest of us freedom of speech. I mean, this is very quickly kind of a philosophical question, but is a government that is demonstrably unwilling to defend its own children, and they are, despite the slogans and the tanks, this is going on a long time, is that a legitimate government? I mean, what's the point of having a government if they won't protect your children? Seriously.
Absolutely. It seems to me that the establishment are now on the side of anything that represents diversity or indeed Muslims supporting Islam. We immediately have to say the Greater Manchester head of police came out this evening and said, you know, we will not tolerate hate against the Muslim community. And for so many of us, we're kind of saying, well, it's okay, then we will tolerate our little girl, 8-year-old girls being slaughtered as they leave a concert, but we won't tolerate hate speech. That seems to be where we're at in the UK tonight.
Well, this is, and around the world, and this is exactly why there are political revolutions, very uncomfortable, messy ones taking place throughout the West, exactly because of this reason. Katie, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
The media love covering Russia and hate covering Manchester and events like it. Up next, we'll explain why those are related phenomena and how the West may have something to gain from cooperating with, hold your breath now, Russia against Islamic extremism. Plus, Joe Concha will be here to talk about the press and its botched coverage last night that really defied parody. We've got examples. Stay tuned.
Break through your allergies.